Welcome to the Movie Spoiler Club, the channel where you can watch movie, television, and streaming series within minutes. Today we're going to spoil the movie Knowing, 2009. This movie story plot is about 50 years after it was buried in a time capsule. A schoolgirl's cryptic document falls into the hands of Caleb Koestler, Chandler Canterbury, the son of Professor John Koestler. Nicolas Cage. John figures out that the encoded message accurately lists every major disaster from the past 5 decades and predicts 3 future calamities. 1. A global cataclysm. When his warnings fall on deaf ears, John enlists the help of the prophetic author's daughter and granddaughter to try to avert the ultimate disaster. On a bright and sunny afternoon, children are chasing each other on the playground during school recess. A sea of smiling faces aside from one young dark-haired girl, stuck in a trance. The bell rings concluding outdoor playtime, but the little girl doesn't move. Her teacher begins to call for her specifically. Lucinda, it's time to come in. Lucinda doesn't take her eyes off the sun. Later during class, the teacher announces that each student will create an image of what they imagine the future to look like in 50 years. When it is time to collect the projects, the teacher reaches Lucinda's desk, and Lucinda is writing voraciously. Miss Taylor tries to hurry her along but ends up taking it before Lucinda can finish. The projects are going to get buried in the class's time capsule. After school, there is a huge ceremony. While everyone is enjoying grilled burgers, hot dogs, and dancing to the music, Lucinda stares from a distance. She holds a yellow balloon in her hand tightly as she watches with a tight face and wide eyes. Miss Taylor notices her for a moment, looks away, but when she returns to Lucinda's spot, she's gone. Later that evening, Lucinda is missing. Emergency responders arrive with police and search dogs. No one can find Lucinda. Miss Taylor explores inside the school and can hear scratching from inside the broom room. She pries open the door and finds Lucinda with bloody fingertips. She was carving a message into the door. Miss Taylor looks frightened but relieved to have found her. Lucinda, with tears in her eyes, begs Miss Taylor, "Make them stop whispering, please." The opening credits roll as scenes of planet Earth in space. Each shot is a little closer to its atmosphere. The cities glow and flicker from the sky. Closer and closer the landscapes grow until we land in a backyard. A man stares into his telescope with a wine glass in his hand. He calls for his son Caleb to come over and take a look. After dinner that night, Caleb settles in for bed. His father wants him to get his rest, because tomorrow is the day that will unbury the time capsule. Through their conversation, we learn that Caleb's mother is deceased. His father kisses him goodnight and Caleb takes off his hearing aid. Downstairs, John enjoys a glass of whiskey and some classical music. He plops down onto the sofa and stares off, deep in his thoughts. His eyes fixate on a gift sitting on a shelf across the room. The next afternoon, John rushes from work to meet Caleb at school for the time capsule ceremony. 2 men recover the time capsule and open its contents for the children to see. Every child gets a letter. Caleb reaches for his historical artifact. He is handed a sealed envelope. On the front, the envelope is signed Lucinda Embry. The whispers rush in and create feedback in his hearing aid. He fiddles with it for a moment and then finds a quiet place. Caleb rips the letter open and he can't make any sense of the message. Other classmates get to look at hand drawings, but Caleb got a mess of jumbled numbers. Later that night, Caleb shows the note to his father. Caleb theorizes that the letter contains a puzzle or a hidden message. After Caleb goes to bed, John sits down for his nightly whiskey, but sets his glass down on Lucinda's letter. It immediately creates a ring on the paper. He decides to take a string of numbers and write them onto his whiteboard in the kitchen. He adds some dashes and the number becomes a date. He researches the date and notices a match. This creates an urge to figure out the rest of the message. He finds dates through the whole page that correlate with events in the past. Some of the numbers are dates, and some of the numbers are how many people died during that event. Some numbers aren't accounted for at all. He works through the night. The next morning, he tries to tell a colleague about the discovery to get his opinion, but his friend won't entertain his theory in the slightest. John is frantic because there are dates on the letter that haven't happened yet. John decides to find Miss Taylor and see if he can learn any new information. When he goes to visit her, John asks if he can reach out to Lucinda, but that's when Miss Taylor tells him that she passed away. Later that afternoon, Caleb is playing outside while his father talks on the phone inside the house. A car pulls up to the edge of the property and Caleb approaches. The man in the passenger side hands Caleb a smooth skipping stone. The car drives away. The next day, John is awoken by Caleb calling from school. John has to pick up Caleb this afternoon. He rubs the sleep from his eyes and gets ready to leave the house. On his way to the school, He gets stuck in traffic. The cars are at a complete stop in the pouring rain. John glances down at the coded letter, and then at his GPS. He notices that the numbers that remain a mystery match the geographic location on his GPS. He is at the exact location where a terrible event will take place. He gets out of his car and walks toward the scene on the road. First responders assure him that everything is under control and traffic will resume promptly. His sentence is cut off as he catches sight of a plane about to crash onto the road in front of them. The wing slices through the road like a knife through butter, sliding through to the grassy field on the other side. There is smoke and flames from the wreckage. John races toward the accident and begins trying to help anyone he sees. A first responder calls him away and John returns home in shock. There are now 2 more disasters that are prophesied. That night, while John continues to process the day's events and his son sleeps upstairs in bed, a pale man spies from the forest. This stranger quietly approaches the home and enters cautiously. A black boot steps carefully on the floor and up the stairs to the boy's room. Caleb rouses awake to the sound of whispers growing increasingly louder. The man is standing at the foot of his bed. The white-haired stranger points a long crooked finger at the window behind Caleb. Caleb turns to see, and through the window, the forest is ablaze. Caleb screams in horror. The man vanishes, and John races upstairs to comfort his son. John spots the stranger in the woods and grabs a baseball bat as he runs outside. John swings at a tree to threaten the intruder, but can no longer see the man. The next morning, John decides to take a little trip with Caleb. From his research, he has gathered that Lucinda married and has a family. From his car, he watches presumably Lucinda's daughter and granddaughter hop into the car. He follows the car all the way to a museum. Everyone hits it off, and they go to lunch together. At the table, John confesses that they didn't meet coincidentally, and that he wants to know more about her mother. There is a disaster waiting to happen on October 18th. Diana is offended and disturbed. She grabs her daughter and leaves immediately. That night, John is watching the news and decides to plug in the geographic location of the next disaster. He makes an anonymous phone call alerting law enforcement that they need to secure that specific area. The tip-off isn't enough. John drops Caleb off with his sister for the day and heads for New York. At the scene, approximately an hour before the event, there are police everywhere but nothing is sealed off or secured. John has created a target for himself and the police are targeting him. He runs down to the subway station terminal. There he scopes out the crowd looking for suspicious characters. He spots someone and when they make eye contact, the man bolts. John chases the man through the terminal. On the edge of the platform while a subway whooshes through the tunnel, the man boards the train, and the chase continues on the subway. He has the man cornered. Then the police show up behind John. John defers the police to the true criminal, who then drops a handful of stolen CD. That can't be the prophecy. Moments later, an oncoming subway train gets derailed and comes flying through the tunnel, crashing into the subway train that stalled on the track. Hundreds are injured, and many die. When John and Caleb return home, Diana and her daughter Abby are waiting on the porch. They all pile into a car together and drive to Lucinda's residence in the woods. The kids are asleep when they arrive, so the two of them explore carefully inside. Diana notices at the end of the letter, there's a mysterious 2 capital letters E written backward, not 33. They are about to leave when John notices the smooth skipping stone on the floor. He touches it and finds more nearby. He follows the trail and lifts the bed. Under the bed, there are carvings beneath it. John and Diana now understand that E stands for everyone else. This next event is the final blow. Outside the house, the shadowy strangers are gathering in the forest. The kids can hear the whispers growing louder in their ears. The kids wake up and can see the strangers are closer to the car. Abby hops into the front seat to stop the strangers in, and Caleb stops them by laying on the horn. The sound scares the strangers and alerts their parents. When they run outside to find the kids, John takes off into the forest to find the men that the kids are talking about. He catches up to a man in the forest. When the man turns to face him, he opens his mouth and unleashes a powerful blinding light. The light obstructs John's vision, and when the light disappears, so does the man. They head home knowing that the end of the world is approaching. In the morning, John wants to make breakfast for everyone. He finds Abby drawing in the living room. She is drawing the sun. This forms a realization in John's mind, and he then rushes to his office. There he refers back to a paper he published about the sun and solar flares. He is predicting that the third and final event will be a massive solar flare that depletes the ozone layer and kills everything in its path. When he shares the news with Diana, she wants to find a way to keep them safe. They determine that the caves in Groton are their best bet. They drive home to gather their things and head for safety. John picks up the gift that remains on the shelf that's still wrapped. He opens it to find a locket. Inside is a picture of him and his family. Before they leave, John calls his parents, whom he hasn't spoken to in years. He tells them to stay safe and seek shelter underground. On the way to the caves, he makes a pit stop at the school. He finds the door Lucinda was carving into 50 years ago. He rips it off the hinges and tries to sand off the paint. Diana thinks John is wasting time. She takes the kids in her car, and they head for the caves. When John uncovers the rest of the code, he steps out of the garage to show Diana, but they're gone. Diana stops at a gas station for gas. Caleb is getting nervous and finds a payphone to call his father. He connects with John and tells them where they are. Diana rushes Caleb off the phone and into the car. She talks to John for a moment, but then the Whisper people take her car and drive off with the kids. Diana shrieks in panic. She grabs another car at the gas station and takes off after them. Diana is speeding down the freeway after the Whisper people. She passes car after car to inch closer to them, but at the intersection, she gets T-boned by a semi-truck and doesn't survive. John reaches the gas station to find no one there. He drives down the freeway and finds the accident on the road. He mourns for Diana and then heads for Lucinda's home, which is located as the same code he found on the door. There he sees Diana's car parked but no one inside. He wanders around shouting after Caleb. In the distance, he can see a Whisper person. He runs toward him and demands to know where Caleb is. Then Caleb appears out of nowhere. Caleb explains that they are chosen. They can choose to go with the Whisper people or stay. Caleb wants to go and so does Abby. Abby and Caleb are ready to board the ship. Caleb walks with John to the spaceship hovering above the ground. The Whisper person stands in the way. John knows now that his son is chosen and he is not. He bends down to assure Caleb that he will be okay and he has to go. Caleb begins to cry because he doesn't want to go without his father. John says that they will always be together and hands him the locket. Caleb turns to board the ship. John watches the ship ascend into the sky. John crumbles to the ground in agony. He falls asleep and awakes to the drizzling rain on his face. He gets into his truck and heads for the city. There are fires and looting, and rioters in the streets. He arrives at his parents' home. They stand to greet him and hug him for the first time in years. The light flares through the bay window behind them and they're gone. On a new planet, Caleb and Abby are dropped off. There's a field of golden grass. The two run for a tree off in the distance as the camera pans out on this new world. This isn't the end. Movie trivia. Do you know that the school in the movie is William Dawes Elementary? William Dawes was one of the writers who, like Paul Revere, warned the Minutemen that British troops were coming. Just as a child at his namesake school was trying to warn people what was coming. This movie gets the movie rating of 6.2 from IMDb. Tomatometer rating of 33 and audience score of 42 from Rotten Tomatoes. Thank you for watching and be sure to hit like, subscribe, share your thoughts in the comment section, and hit the notification bell for the new movie spoiler video every week.